Voice for Good is a podcast where Elliot dives into the stories behind some of the world's leading entrepreneurs and how they are using their voice for good to influence industries. Voice for Good weaves narrative, as well as insights, into the journey of entrepreneurs, innovators, industry leaders, and the impact they are having while they are using their voice for good.
And welcome back to another episode of Voice for Good. My name is Elliot Kay, a two-time best-selling author, and now we are in season 2 of Voice for Good, where I've been interviewing psychologists and I've been to hypnotherapists and neuroscientists and a variety of experts and guests, and this week it's no different. I have Bret with us, and Bret's going to unravel the mystery of who is Bret. But as I always say in every episode, read the bio if you want to find out a lot more about Bret. Read the bio, because I want to get to nitty gritty. First of all, Bret, thanks for coming on Voice for Good. Are you having a great day?
I'm always having a great day, Elliot. Thanks for having me. All the better for getting able to connect with you for a little bit.
I know, I haven't seen you for a very, very long time. You always have a great day? Really? Every single day?
I firmly believe it's a choice about the kind of day you're going to have. So, we make our choices.
That's very true. I like that. Very, very true. So season 2 has been and will be all about confidence. So in your expertise, what is confidence?
Yeah, so confidence is that ability to be comfortable with yourself. I think it's probably as simple as that.
Being comfortable with yourself. So if we were to strip that back a bit, is that comfortable physically? Is that comfortable inside? Is it both? Is it comfortable accepting that I'm always going to mess it up and things aren't going to always go right? Let's strip that back a bit.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's all those things. I think when we think about confidence comes from, I suppose, a place of internal psychological safety, right? And the more psychologically safe we feel ourselves,
Yep.
then the more willing we are to share ideas, share our thoughts, be in front of a group, do all of those things that oftentimes may challenge those who are a bit less confident.
Okay. So what is psychological safety then? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so when we think about, I kind of come at everything from a neuroscience perspective, right?
Okay,
So when we think
right.
about what's going on in our brains, right?
Okay.
And there's been lots and lots of studies that have to do with how we feel in what we call our perceived status, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And so status is that thing that kind of says, where do I fit in the pecking order, so to speak,
Okay.
right? Where's my position? And a lot of studies have shown that those who have a higher perceived status are much more likely to share ideas, much more likely to speak up, much more likely to talk about things. And that higher perceived status is the thing that gives a sense of psychological safety. So if, for instance, if I am, I don't know, delivering a talk somewhere on a stage in front of a group of people, that psychological safety is that thing that tells me that the group of people that's there have come to listen to me and they're rooting for me. They're not necessarily looking for me to mess up.
Okay, got you. So when it comes down to it, are we talking about how we perceive the situation and we're evaluating, am I likely to get injured or hurt? I don't mean physically, mentally, maybe physically. Is that what you mean by like?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, again, the way that we kind of perceive the world, right? We take in information in a number of different ways, right? We take it in through our senses. We see things, we hear things, we smell things, we touch things, we feel things.
Yeah.
And what happens is as we take that information in within our brains, we kind of filter it, right? And we then apply our perceived filters to that information, and then we build a picture in our head of what we think is going on.
Okay.
Right. And so that picture isn't necessarily, first of all, it's not going to be consistent across everybody because all of our brains are different. We all have different connections. We all have different experience.
Yeah.
And so my picture of an event is going to be different than your picture of an event.
Correct.
Right. And oftentimes we tend to build those pictures with a sort of with a lens of what I'll call a lens of threat. in those
Okay.
pictures.
Got you. So it's built into us, this lens of threat.
Absolutely, yeah, and I mean, it's really primitive in our brains. I mean, we look at everything through the lens of threat or reward. Everything we see, it goes back to sort of caveman days. Is that thing on the ground a snake or a stick? And
Okay.
we carry that through our entire lives. And so when we're standing on stage, for instance, we still have that threat impulse. In fact, more of our brain circuitry, if you will, is dedicated to detecting threat than anything else. And it's responsible for our survival, so it's not necessarily always a bad thing.
Yeah.
But sometimes we tend to focus on that threat. We tend to focus on the negative. We tend to focus on the sort of what if something bad's going to happen. And then that's where our confidence really takes a knock.
Okay. So we're continuously, I guess our brain's continuously working out, is it safe? Are we safe?
Absolutely.
Are we going to live? Right? That's kind of stripping it right down to basics. Yeah.
Yep.
And so what you're talking about, psychological safety, is basically that our brain's going, it's okay, we're safe, it's all good here. And the ability to develop that on a regular basis, on a daily basis, is what you would define as confidence. Because it's also the ability to deal with things when things don't go right.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. And I mean that's kind of key. I mean, when we find ourselves in that state of threat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, what's going on in our brains, right? So if I really simplify, so if we've got sort of two systems in our brain, right? We have a limbic system that's responsible for all of our emotional response and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then we have part of our brain that kind of sits behind our forehead called the prefrontal cortex.
Uh-huh.
And the prefrontal cortex is the thing that does all of our rational thinking. It's the thing that, it's our executive center, so to speak.
Yeah.
And what happens when we start to experience a perceived threat is our limbic system starts to get a bit excited. And when that happens, it has a couple of knock-on effects. First of all, our brains, we share resources amongst all of the systems in our brain. So we have a finite cognitive resource. And so when our limbic system starts to wake up, it starts to take that resource away from our prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
So right off the bat, our rational thought starts to get a bit handicapped.
Okay.
And then it continues because as our limbic system gets more excited, it sends messages to our adrenal glands, and our adrenal glands kick out a bunch of hormones that are not necessarily the most positive hormones.
Is that
so
cortisol?
Yeah, so cortisol.
Okay.
And cortisol is, I mean, it's the stress hormone, right? It makes you sick, it makes you fat, does all sorts of terrible things.
Okay.
But the other thing that happens is our prefrontal cortex is, we can't deal with a flood of cortisol. So our prefrontal cortex almost moves out of the way. And now we're in full-on emotional limbic thought.
Gotcha.
So if I'm
that
standing,
like code for meltdown?
yes, yeah. In fact, the one of the key parts of our limbic system is called the amygdala,
Yes.
and this is known as amygdala hijack.
Oh,
So
okay. It's
right?
like someone's terrorists come and
Yeah.
hijacked it, right?
Just about, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and so if you go back to that example, standing on stage and in front of a room full of people,
Yes.
what happens is as we start to get, our limbic system starts to get into overdrive, then all of a sudden that rational piece of our brain that says, look, everybody's rooting for you, everybody's come to hear you, gets moved out of the way. Yeah, and the limbic system is saying, oh no, there's threat. Look at all these people; they're all staring at you. Everybody's looking at you. What if you mess up? What happens? And then all of a sudden we freak out.
Okay. So is that where you're grabbed and you're calm down, breathe, and that's to bring it back into the brain and that oxygen, and so it's not just a matter of there is a real pragmatic use of breath when it comes to regaining and getting
Absolutely.
composed again and allowing your veins to open up again and your brain some oxygen so it can take control again. Is that right?
Yeah. So what you want to do is you want to you want the cortisol to just kind of dissipate, right? So if you've ever been in a situation, I don't know, you're driving down the road and maybe the person in front of you slams on their brakes, or a child runs out in the street and you slam on your brakes, and all of a sudden that initial shock, and that's the adrenaline that makes you do that. But then afterwards you're gonna and that's your body's natural defense working to dissipate that cortisol. so you can then regain control.
Gotcha. So in your experience, I mean, have you yourself struggled with confidence at any point, or have you always been like, hey, I've got this?
Yeah. I, probably much like you, I've had a career where I've been upfront as long as I can really remember.
Yes.
So I suppose there's always that tension before an event. There's that tension before you do something. I used to do a lot of live television, and so that that tension as they're in your earpiece.
Yes.
3, 2, 1, cue Bret, and then it's that adrenaline. But I suppose I haven't necessarily had significant confidence issues other than that kind of thing. I work with a lot of people that do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so myself, like I said, I've just kind of always been that sort of person that's been upfront for whatever reason.
Great. Well, I don't think everybody has to go through some form of, oh my God, this happened to me. Sometimes it's actually refreshing to hear that when someone didn't, but they care enough about those who are, right?
I mean, I'll tell you that the very first, probably the closest thing, the very first time I ever did a presentation in front of a large audience. Yeah. So I was working for this IT company back in the late 90s. And we had a brand new product that we were launching, and we had paid, I don't know, thousands of this is in America, so thousands of dollars to sponsor this huge event. Mm-hmm. And with the sponsorship, we got a keynote.
Okay.
And so they nominated me to do the keynote.
Oh wow!
Right. Well, and I had not spoken in front of an audience before, but I thought, yeah, okay, no problem.
I got this.
Exactly. So we spent some months poring over the slide deck, thinking about what I was going to say, working on the messaging, and I practiced and I delivered it to my manager and delivered it to 2 or 3 people in a room. And then the day came, and I'm sat in this audience in New York, and there was, I don't know, 600 or 700 people in the audience.
Very different to 2 or 3 people.
Very different, yeah. So they introduced me. I took the stage, everybody's applauding, and I get up and I open my laptop, and I looked up, and all of a sudden it hit me that everybody was staring at me, and it really freaked me out. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And I thought, yeah, oh yeah, I had a joke.
You tried the
sort
joke.
of fumbled through my joke and delivered the punchline, and it was silent.
No, it's like everyone's nightmare when they open with a joke, right?
Exactly. I mean, it was. I mean, you couldn't write it. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then of course, that threw me in a further state of threat. And then I kind of ran to my laptop, and I opened the laptop, and I pulled up my slides, and I forgot everything I was supposed to say.
Oh no, I really can feel for you right now. I can picture it as well. I've seen so many people go through that, and then it gets worse. You can end up in this rabbit hole.
Exactly, and you just keep it. And I got through, so I had a 45-minute slot. It took me about 15 minutes to get through my entire presentation.
Wow.
And then I was just standing there, and everybody was still looking at me.
And they're like, that's it? That's it?
Yeah. And I mean, luckily the host was really gracious, and, kind of got up and tried to do an impromptu question and answer session to kind of make it look like it was planned this way. And, but yeah, that's probably the most miserable experience I've ever had. And I suppose there's probably, if I think about it, there's probably, quite a knock to my confidence at that point.
And you bounce back.
Yeah. I mean, because you always have to look at something and say, right, what can I learn from that?
Exactly.
What was going on, right?
Yeah, and I think so. Did that inspire you then to take any training or to work on anything, or did you just go, well, I'm going to learn from that and never do that again?
Yeah, well, that was it. And then the company that I was with at that time, I was kind of the public face of the company, so. I said, right. I said, that was dreadful. Let's just let's find another one, and let's just keep going and keep going and keep going. And then from then on, I just kind of used that as that signpost of great. What I've learned from there is that people were looking at me, but I knew my content in and out, and it was once all the people looking at me got into my head is when it moved everything else out of the way. So I wasn't going to do that again.
Yeah.
So then it was just just kind of take the bull by the horn, so to speak. And, let's do it again, and let's do it better.
Well, you've definitely got a, I've got this, get up and go time of mortality from A, knowing you, and B, from what we're talking about. But from working with people who have a lot of confidence issues, what would you say are the common themes in terms of why they turn to you? Like what? Because there are certain things that I find when it comes to confidence, a lot of people share. In your experience, what would they be?
Yeah, so I mean that's it primarily. I mean, I think that people, for the most part, when they come to me, that they where their confidence is struggling is in their the recognition that they know their content, first of
Okay.
all, right? Because I always say, look, whether you and I are sitting in a room or whether you're on stage in front of 1,000 people, it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
And so we frame it differently. And if we see a room full of people, and that frame then starts to get into our heads, and so like the example I just gave you, I forgot my
Yeah.
content,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I knew my content, right?
Yeah. And do you find self-worth, imposter syndrome, all that kicks in when they come to work with
Yeah.
you?
So I mean, imposter syndrome. I mean that kind of stems from there. I mean, imposter syndrome is that thing that says, look, I don't know my information. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know my content. I don't know, the thing that I'm supposed to be an expert in.
Yeah.
And I mean that's really key. And particularly, I mean, I know you work with a lot of sort of people starting their own business and that kind of stuff as well. And it's very similar, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's gosh, what do I charge for this?
Yes.
Oh, I
Who
better
am
I
I
better
to
give it
charge
away.
this amount is the other one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, are you an expert or not? Because people don't pay me for my time. People pay me for my experience. People pay me for my knowledge. People pay me for my education,
Yeah.
right? And so I think again, it's sort of a mindset shift.
Got you. So when it comes to shifting that mindset and doing a lot of that, I ask a lot of my guests is what are some of practical ways that we can develop that psychological safety, or we can be comfortable within ourselves? Because I think there's a lot of books, of course, a lot of information out there, which in theory we know makes sense, but how do we move the theory to the practical? Have you got any tips or advice on that?
Yeah. So I mean, depending on what the situation is, there's some kind of strategic actions and some more sort of kind of immediate actions, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right. So what are the sort of the long-term things to start to develop that different mindset, right?
Okay.
And I talk about it in a way that we tell ourselves stories all the time, right?
Yes.
And what I what
That's
I
right.
when I work with public speakers, what I try to make a differentiation between is our story versus our stories. So
Yes.
the story is the thing that I'm going to tell my audience. The stories are the things that I tell myself.
Got you.
And oftentimes our stories don't have the same endings that our story does.
No
Right.
happy
And
ending
it's
there then.
yeah. And it's the stories that we tell ourselves that kind of tend to really really get in the way. So what are we doing, right? What are we doing when we are telling ourselves stories, right? What's the impact of the things that we're telling? What's the influence that we're having over ourselves, and how are we able to really sort of look into our minds to make a difference,
Yeah.
right? So if we think about those things, um, you know, the way that our sort of mindset gets sort of cast is because we tend to. I mean, sometimes we tell our stories. Sometimes we pick up our stories where somebody else has left off,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So how do we change those? How do we recognize the influence of what's going on? Right. So
Yeah.
so where's the source of the stories I'm telling myself, for instance?
So one step is to be aware of your stories, and then the next step is to be aware where the story comes from.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Um, so if you think about if you think about those things, what's really kind of going on in our minds, right? And so some of the things that we're doing is first of all, if we think about this, I call this spying on your mind, right?
Okay.
I did a TED talk on this.
Oh, yeah.
So if you first of all, um, you separate your feelings and actions,
Yep.
right? So and so so what I mean by that is, let's say that we're sort of attempting something new for the very first time,
Yep.
and we might miss our target on the first try, right?
Hmm. Often
What?
happens.
Yeah. So what does that do to our stories, right? What does that talk track in the back of our head tell us about that experience, and how does it make us feel, right?
Okay.
We're thinking, oh gosh, I failed at that, so I'm never going to try it again. Gosh, I failed at that, and it's horrible. I never ever want to do that again, right?
Okay.
Or we can take sort of control of that and say, okay, let's separate our feelings from what's really going on here, right? And Thomas Edison said, "I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb," right?
Yeah.
But so if we instead we can take the feelings, we can separate our feelings from our actions. We can say, okay, so I learned some things there. I learned some things that first keynote that I did. I learned what not to do. I learned, how to kind of control some things.
Hmm.
And so I was able to kind of shift my mindset a bit and say, right, okay. So what I want to do now is I want to learn from that. So what can I learn from that? I can learn not to let my feelings get in the way, for instance,
Hmm.
right?
Good. You.
The next thing is I start to look for patterns. So what are the patterns going on in my internal dialogue, right? And as we start to notice these patterns, which probably have taken a long time to develop, we can start to kind of look at them through that separation lens and recognize where our mindsets are originating from,
Hmm.
right? What's the pattern that is emerging, right?
Right.
And so where do they come from? I tell a story about a little girl I saw in a supermarket one time, and I was standing in the queue, and she's probably, I don't know, 4 years old, maybe 3 years old, little yellow dress. I'll never forget her face because she was all kind of covered in ice cream from head to toe. And I'm standing in the queue, and her and her mother in front of me, and she's kind of hiding behind her mom's legs and kind of peering out at me and kind of giving me a smile and then ducking. How little kids kind of play that way.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at her and smiling at her, and then I looked up at her mom, and her mom smiles at me, and she says, "Oh yeah, that's Emily. She's just shy." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, don't tell her that,"
Got you. Yeah.
because that's where these patterns come from,
Yep.
right? And so how do we recognize where those patterns come from? As we start to recognize the patterns, we can start to shift those patterns differently. Say, okay, well, no, I don't have to be shy, because how does that mindset serve, that little girl when she's taking her exams, when she's in her, her college interviews, when she's at her first job interview, and
Yeah.
everything in her head says, "Oh, I'm just shy,"
Yeah.
right?
So let me ask you this then, because what's really interesting is you're also talking about formation of an identity, right? So if we've created an identity around something, I'm shy, or I always fail, I always this. Yes, it's story, but within that story, we almost put ourselves in the center of that, and we've created an identity. And within that, we pull in, of course, our experience, our beliefs, our background, our upbringing. So all of that combined is really what needs to shift. Is that right?
Yeah. So how do you shift it? How do you shift it all, right?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah. So this is where patterns really come in, right?
Right.
So we can talk about separation of feelings from actions,
Uh-huh.
right? And so as we look at those things, what can we do to sort of shift our feelings? Because we label our feelings as well, right? The
Yes.
stories we tell ourselves, right? So if if you're not necessarily, so let me give you an example. So if I tell you, okay, Elliot, so you're sitting there, and all of a sudden you start to get a bit short of breath, and you can feel your heart really beating in your chest, and your palms are a bit clammy, and maybe there's a bit of sweat over your brow, and maybe you've got some butterflies in your stomach. What are you feeling?
I guess we would call that nerves.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Or
yeah, nerves.
excitement.
Thank you. So that's the thing,
Right?
right? So
Yeah.
most people would say, "Oh, I'm feeling anxious,"
Yes.
right? Um, but if I say, okay, let's say you haven't seen your wife for 2 months and you're standing at the arrivals hall at Heathrow waiting for her to come through. Describe what you're feeling.
Well, hopefully the answer will be horny. No, I'm joking. But yes.
Exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
The same heart beating, the same butterflies, the same, but you label that differently. You label that as excitement.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And so when we start to make that separation, and then we can start to recognize patterns. Gee, so as I'm thinking about the patterns, are you a skier?
No, I'm not. I'm afraid.
Okay, so I'm not a skier either, but what skiers tell me is that when they go down advanced runs, for instance, when they go down advanced hills and there's trees everywhere.
Yeah.
And so what they say is when I get ready to go down a hill, I start to plan my line.
Okay.
And as I'm going down the hill, I'm looking at my line, where I'm going to go. Right? I'm not really looking at the trees. I'm looking at my line.
Gotcha.
For a lot of us in our patterns, we're too busy looking at the trees. And when we look at the trees, we run into them. Right?
Yeah, because if we're looking at it, we're aiming for it.
Right. So how do we change that? I mean, I used to when I used to do boxing ring announcing, and so being in live television, you know the drill. You've got the guy in your ear, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, cue Bret, and then I would deliver my stuff.
Yeah.
And as I was getting the countdown, the thing that used to go through my head is don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up, and then he would cue me, and guess what?
You'd screw up.
I'd screw up a lot.
Yeah.
Right. When I kind of came to this pattern recognition in my own head, and I thought, no, you know what? I'm as they're counting me down, I'm going to smash it. I'm going to smash it. I'm going to smash it.
Yeah.
And guess what? Mistakes still came, but not nearly the way that they used to, because I was focusing on my line and not the trees. And oftentimes we spend too much time looking at those trees.
Gotcha.
Right.
So it's about recognizing the story, recognizing where it comes from, recognizing the patterns, and then of course reforming that and reframing that.
So when we talk about that acronym of spying on your mind, right? So it's the separation, it's the pattern, and then the why is what I call everything, right?
Okay.
So I just haven't mastered this yet.
Gotcha.
Right, which is going to give me a future state of motivation that, well, I haven't mastered it yet, but I will someday. So I'm going to keep working at it. I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm going to keep doing what I can do and take those learnings and bring them into the next, the next activity, whatever that next activity happens to be.
Yeah. So patience must play a massive part in this.
Yeah, patience, or just being a lifelong learner, really, about everything. Right.
You mean it won't happen overnight? I won't just do it and everything in my whole life will change and everything will fall in my lap and I go.
Yeah, all you have to do is listen to one podcast from Elliot and Bret and you will be amazing for the rest of your life.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that is true. Let's not take that away from people. Let's not shortchange them here.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. So as someone who deals with neuroscience, is there anything that you think is absolute waffle out there when it comes to confidence? Is there anything like, ugh, that is so bad? If you're willing to share such things.
Yeah. I suppose there's lots of waffle out there, really.
There is a lot.
I mean, did you know, and I don't know, this may, the things that really kind of I suppose get under my skin more than anything else is just believe it and you'll achieve it.
Oh yes.
Right.
That.
Okay. Where's the substance? Right.
Yeah.
Just manifest confidence.
Oh yes.
Where's the substance? Manifest anything. Are you kidding me? And so
they'll
those
charge
kind of
you
things
£10,000 for the privilege.
That's exactly right. But only if you get to the back of the room with your credit card within the next 20 minutes.
Right.
Because I only have 10 of them.
Yeah. Because I've just told you about abundance for the last X amount of hours, but I've only got 10 spaces. It's like Okay.
And I people charge. I charge people £10,000 an hour for my advice, but actually I've spent the last 3 hours in this room for free.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, those kind of things just get under my skin. But I think the thing is that particularly in our industry is do some research.
Yes.
Find out what's really going on, and I mean, there's there's all the entrepreneurs and all that kind of stuff out there, but just in the things that you follow and the things that you do and the things that you think about, do a bit of research.
Yeah.
Like Google's your friend here. Find out, find out what's going on. Find out where you don't expect everybody to have, full on neuroscience or psychology degree, but at the same time, think about it, is this rational? Is this working? Is this, and for, those that continue to chase these sorts of, these sorts of programs that we just kind of mentioned,
Yeah.
what does that do to your confidence? Because you pay money, you do a program and it doesn't work. And it's your fault, of course, because you didn't do it right.
Yeah.
So you pay some more money, you do another program and it doesn't work. And of course it's your fault because you didn't do it right.
Right.
And so it's knock after knock after knock on your own confidence. And then you're thinking, why aren't I confident? Well, because because the talk track that's going in your mind now is that you fail at everything.
Yeah.
But in actuality, yeah, exactly.
And that's often a reflection of people's confidence as well. Whether it's right or wrong is a different conversation. But
well, yeah,
a lot of people equate that to success and confidence.
I'll tell you that and this kind of something that what I try to kind of live by really is, think about what's right. Don't think about what's easy.
Right.
And too many times we think about what's easy. Right?
Yeah, and I think that's a lot because of the world we live in right now. The overnight, the quick fix, the immutability of things, hasn't helped that. Because things are a lot easier than they've ever been to get access to. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy to achieve, and I think that's a big part of that.
Well, the number of things that I see, particularly on social media, where somebody says, "Oh, I have to deliver a course on topic XYZ in the next week. Does anybody have any good resources for this?" I'm thinking, why are you even out there? And these aren't like courses on how to screw in a light bulb.
Yeah.
These are serious courses, on resilience, on mindfulness, on mental health.
Yeah, that's the.
Are you kidding? And you're trying to find your resources a week before you go in to deliver a course.
Yeah,
really?
Advice, don't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's really dangerous because a lot of it's well intended, but poor execution can have a devastating effect. And I think that's where we're going with this. And people have to take responsibility. And I think I don't coach anymore. I'm not in the coaching space. But I think it's that whole heroic, I'm a coach. Of course I can do everything. I can talk about it. It's very dangerous for the people on the receiving end to be on the other side of that. So Bret, thank you. I mean, you've shared so much. I mean, again, I could sit on this with you for 4 hours, but you and I are busy people as well. So if people want to find out more about you, where do they go? Where can they reach out? Do you want to share some details?
So my website is lifevroom, LIFEVROOM.com. So by all means, go have a look around. If you want to have a chat, you want to get in touch, I'm not one big for necessarily the hard sell, but just drop me an email. It's Bret, BRET @lifevroom.com.
Brilliant.
And that's, probably the best way. I'm always happy to have a discussion with anybody about anything.
Fabulous. And final message to anyone listening that might be struggling with confidence right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing, kind of as I said, is, just think about what's right, not what's easy. It's easy to doubt ourselves. It's easy to, to think that we aren't necessarily have the expertise that we've been spending our life developing. So, don't fall into that trap. And I'll give you a final, sort of a final practical example. When there's a situation where you need some confidence in a hurry, and maybe you're delivering something, maybe you're feeling a bit anxious. Look around the room, and when you do, find 5 things that you can see and just name them in your mind. Mm-hmm. And then notice 4 things that you can hear. Again, name them in your mind. And then find 3 things that you can touch. It might be a podium, might be your pant leg, might be, whatever. And then look for 2 things that you can smell. Might be your own cologne, might be just the smell in the room, whatever. And then look inside and find 1 thing that you feel, and I guarantee that you will feel a feeling of calmness, and the anxiety will start to dissipate, and just give your mind that opportunity to just quiet down, and then smash whatever you're going at.
Brilliant. Bret, thank you again. So this has been an incredible episode. So it's, let's become aware of the stories we're telling ourselves. Let's really learn to recognize where they came from and then address it. It's about recognizing the pattern and how you go in and you tweak it. So then you do have a happy ending, Disney style versus, any other ending that you might be thinking. But it's really important that we create that, earlier, and we talked about psychological safety, and you feel okay. And the way to do that is to go with what's right, not what is easy. So Bret, thank you for that. That was brilliant. For anybody out there right now, reach out to Bret. Otherwise, we'll be back with another episode next week of Voice for Good. Till then, be seen, be heard, and always use your voice for good. Bye now.
You have been listening to Voice for Good with Elliot Kay. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on Instagram and on YouTube. This has been a Speaker Express podcast production. Remember to be seen, be heard, and always use your voice for good.